was a huge privilege the other evening facilitating at this space. You've done such an incredible job of designing a beautiful space aesthetically, but also energetically. I came in and immediately thought, I really want to do some more things here. And yeah, I'm really grateful that you've invited me for this podcast and that you're so receptive to the breath, because I'm very passionate about it and becoming more passionate by the day.
Yeah. One of my biggest passions in life is hopefully that someday I'll be a good singer. I think that's probably deeply connected with the breath. And I've forever actually never had a regular pranayam practice or a breathwork practice. I do things sporadically, but it's every day. It's something I do something every day, but it's very different every day. But I think it's something that I do wish to learn a lot more about.
So yeah, I mean, it is really great to have variety within breath. You know, you have the holotropic breathing, which I facilitate, which is also known as circular breathing, shamanic breath, rebirthing breath, conscious connective breath. It has many different names. But then you have all of the different pranayama practices, you have kundalini kriyas, you have oxygen advantage breath, you have so many different styles of breath that all have different intentions and purposes. Now, unfortunately, what often happens is that yogis that do pranayama might say holotropic breathing is not necessarily good. Oxygen advantage might have arguments about that practice being the most efficient. But what I think and feel that people miss often is that all of these different breath practices are massively beneficial. You just have to understand the intention of them, and then to not just pigeonhole yourself in one practice. You know, pranayama is so powerful. If you have a pranayama practice that is regular and consistent, and it's the same pranayama practice, it's life-changing. But then to cut yourself off from all of these other incredible practices that have completely different intentions is like creating separation. You know, it's separating yourself from different ways in which you are doing the same thing, which is breathing.
But and I've been learning yoga for the last 2 years, and not very dedicatedly, but even for someone with 2 years now into yoga, breath and different styles of breathing techniques, and what you mentioned about the circular breathing, holotropic breathing, shamanic breathing, it would be very confusing for someone who's an outsider.
Yes.
And what should one do? How should one go ahead? You know, how does one even find the right teachers? It could be quite confusing. And maybe just if you could just lay down just for a basic beginner, you know, someone who's just starting, who lives in the city, typically maybe someone 30, 40, 50 years old, is doing some amount of exercises, a little bit of yoga, but not a deep connection, but wishes to connect more with the breath, and there's so many paths available.
Yeah, absolutely. I can give a clear explanation and really start to help you understand how to divide the practices. So you have pranayama, which is the yogic breathing techniques. They're all within the lineage of yoga. They have lots of different variations and options within them. Some of the breaths are calming, some of the breaths are stimulating. These breath practices have been around for, some say, 20,000 or more years. These practices are often combined with yoga, but don't have to be combined with yoga. They're definitely something that if I was to discuss all of the different pranayama practices, I would be here for about another hour and a half. So it's worth finding a well-versed, qualified, reputable yoga teacher or pranayama teacher that, most importantly, you really get along with. You really resonate with them, that you go to the practice and that the words they're speaking speak as truth to you. So that would be my advice to anyone who's looking into the yogic practices of breath, is to try a few different facilitators, go to one where their words are really landing with you, because there's no point going to a practice with someone who you're not resonating with. And you'll know, you might go to 4 or 5 practices and you'll go in a class, go, this is someone that I want to go back to. Now, if we're talking about holotropic breathing, conscious connective breath, circular breathing, it has many different names, but really The different names are just talking about the different environment that you would be doing it in. For instance, rebirthing breath, you're actually, often some rebirthing breath is done where you're held with your head under the water and your face out of it, which is a fascinating experience. Or conscious connective breathing. These different names are dependent on the different schools that it's come from, the different places in the world where it's come from, the environment it's in, whether you are using breath retentions or not. But to really simply explain what conscious connective breathing is, two main intentions when you're doing this. These main intentions are, you're looking to breathe deep into the belly, okay? Deep down into your belly. Now, the reason why you want to be directing the breath into the belly is when you're breathing into this area of the body, it's activating the parasympathetic, the rest and digest. So that's your first intention when you're breathing. The second intention, and the reason why it's often called circular breathing, is that you're breathing with no pause at the top or the bottom of the breath. So the breath continues. It goes in an inhalation and an exhalation, and it is constantly moving and flowing. Now, different schools of circular breathing will use different styles of breath. Some breathe in through the nose and out of the mouth. Some breathe with a closed mouth inhale and an open mouthed exhale. I actually like to use different variations when I teach. And what I tend to do when I facilitate is begin with the variations that are the least intense. If you're breathing in and out through the nose in a circular way, this is going to be the least intense. A closed mouth inhale and an open mouthed exhale, when you come to circular breathing, is going to be the most intense. So circular breathing, we're breathing in this way. Now, why are we breathing in this way? So a lot of people misconstrue this practice. They talk about breath efficiency and improving your CO2 tolerance and your VO2 max. You're not really, that isn't the primary intention of circular breathing.
But those are benefits too.
In terms of opening out the diaphragm and the fascia, yes, beneficial. Actually, in terms of breath efficiency, it can, when you're doing it regularly, lower the efficiency, which is why you have to understand that and put in things like breath retentions, which increase the efficiency of your breath. The primary intention, though, with this circular breathing is that you're dropping into your inner landscape. When you're breathing in this circular way, what starts to happen is your conscious mind, as long as you feel safe, your conscious mind starts to switch off and you start to move into the subconscious realm of yourself. Now, your conscious mind and your thinking brain is operating the majority of your day-to-day tasks, but it is about 3 to 5% of your consciousness.
Could you repeat that, please?
So your day-to-day activities, you're using 3 to 5% of your capacity, and that 3 to 5% is conscious. Now, the 95 to 97% that is unconscious is there still. And it is often shaping the way in which you see the world. If I have a traumatic episode with an ex-partner, say, my subconscious might see somebody walking in the street that walks a similar way to them and looks a similar way to them, and I will automatically, on an unconscious level, judge that person and be less interested in interacting with them, or maybe even be triggered by their mere presence. And so when we're breathing in this way, we're working into these unconscious layers of ourselves. Now, it's my belief that circular breathing is a yogic practice. I believe that there's many different schools of wellness, but I believe that there is yoga and tantra often. I see things as yogic or tantric. Now, from my perspective, what I believe is yoga is the practice of looking inwards and cleaning the lens in which you see the world. And that tantra is the practice of connecting to the external through the senses: taste, smell, sight, touch, feeling, intuition. Okay, all of these things are tantric. So I could lift up a cup of chai, say, and I could do it in a very tantric way. I could be very, very present with it. Now, this is also still a yogic practice. But what I find in our society is that often either people are very much in their yoga practice. So they're in prayer, they're in deep spirituality, they're in deep meditation all the time, they're doing their japa every day, and they're kind of not grounded. They're off in the ethers. So they'll be like, oh, you know, my guru, and it's beautiful, but then they're not really in their human existence. They're not really in their human connection. They're so detached from the physical realm that they're not necessarily present. So beautiful for them. They're obviously off in a state of bliss, but we have this human vessel that we exist in. What I see on the other end of the spectrum often is people practicing non-conscious tantra. So they're not even realizing that everything they're doing is, right, I want sex, or I want food, or I want this now. And these wants are coming from a place where the inner landscape is distorted, and it's coming from a place of scarcity because they've not cleaned the lens in which they see the world. So often people that don't practice any yoga, don't practice any tantra, they're actually, from my perspective, practicing unconscious tantra. You have these two together, and then you can be really balanced. You can be in your mindfulness, in your presence, seeing the world through a clear lens, but you're also connecting through this physical vessel you've been given.
Oh, that's such an amazing way that you've put it.
Thank you.
And yeah, lovely. And how long are you planning to be in Rishikesh here?
So my plan was to be in Rishikesh until I was going to stay here until probably the 4th of July, but my plans look like they've changed a little bit now. I have a couple of friends. I have an amazing ecstatic dance facilitator friend called Anaida, and her partner Leah, who is a cacaoista, and she's also she also creates sound journeys and is a sound therapist. She's also a shiatsu masseuse as well. Incredible, but they are an incredible pairing. And I've assisted them a little bit on some events they did in Goa, but they've specifically asked me to go to Mumbai and do some work with them. We're doing a workshop together in August in Manchester, and we may well even be doing some things in Portugal in July, so it's all unfolding and percolating. But so far I am absolutely blown away by Rishikesh. I've only been here for 9 days, and this community has welcomed me with open arms. I already got to facilitate in your space, which was a huge privilege. I'm doing a 100-hour Kundalini training at the moment, which is really insightful, and it's giving me more knowledge for the breath training that I'm currently writing. And just going in the secret waterfall, which is not so secret anymore, and the Ganga, and bathing in those waters, because breath and cold water is a big practice of mine, but bathing in those waters has been really purifying and really expansive.
Could you expand a little about bathing in cold water? I think it's something like Wim Hofman.
Yes,
and
correct.
Could this, for a layperson who doesn't understand anything about cold water and breath,
100%.
Why is that important, and can anyone do it?
Yeah, so what I would say is that people with blood pressure or heart-related issues have to be very careful when they're doing cold water. Now, the practice of cold water, if you're just jumping into a cold body of water when your body isn't prepared, it can be not good for the body. It can overstimulate the nervous system. It can be a little bit dangerous. But this is why we do breath beforehand. Now, the interesting thing is, on a scientific level, if you breathe in this way, now Wim Hof is a circular breathing technique, again, like we discussed earlier, but these are short, sharp rounds of breath. These are 2 to 3 minute rounds, and you'll do 3 of them with a 1 minute breath retention in between, and you're breathing very dynamically. And then after 2 to 3 minutes, you're breathing in and holding the breath. What we're actually doing there is putting the nervous system into sympathetic. We're putting the nervous system into fight or flight. At the same time, this really clears out the mind. It really clears out the chitta-vrittis, the whirring of the mind. And so people would be like, why would you want to put the body into fight or flight? So if you are consciously putting the body into fight or flight, and then you're going into a freezing cold body of water, the nervous system is already prepared. If the nervous system's in rest and digest and it's very relaxed, and then you go in the cold water, there's this big shock. And this really affects the breath. It creates a shock response. It's something that really has to be steadied. Now, the Wim Hof technique's amazing. He is incredible. He's very inspiring. What I find interesting is that technique is being taught very scientifically. You know, the scientific benefits are noted. Andrew Huberman talks about them a lot. There's been a lot of scientific studies about how it acts as a full flush for your lymphatic system, how it increases your circulatory system of your body. Actually, if you have something like Raynaud's, if you continually go in cold water, it improves it and actually eventually gets rid of it. I had a friend that had the worst Raynaud's I've ever seen, and he is now a cold water facilitator in many different countries. And he got rid of his Raynaud's with us going together over the winter in the UK for 2 weeks, and it went. So circulatory, what it's also doing is it's basically, if you do that early in the morning, it's pouring all the blood to the central organs of your body and then pouring all the blood out. This is activating all of the different systems in your body, your circulatory system, your endocrine system. It's almost like switching on a sports car and letting it warm up. And you start the day from that place where your body is really ready to go. It also really spikes the dopamine levels and increases the dopamine levels. But these effects last for about 2.5 hours. So rather than having a cup of coffee where you get an increase in energy and then it drops off, there's this real big rampant increase. And a lot of people that I've worked with have found they've been a lot more productive doing that.
I do have 4 cups of coffee a day.
Yeah, and so this is
first
the
thing
thing.
In the morning I do.
And this is the thing, it's a normal thing in our society that we drink coffee, but our endocrine system, when it gets used to coffee, when it gets used to it, if you're enjoying coffee and it's not habitual, if it's habitual, the endocrine system gets used to having coffee and then it stops producing its own energy. It goes, oh, we require the coffee for the energy. And then as a result of that, your body then is so used to it that you get into this routine. And again, like, I don't think anything is necessarily good or bad. Everything, when practiced mindfully, is good. Like, too much cold water perhaps is not great for people. And also, on an Ayurvedic level, certain people's, going back to what you were saying at the start, for some people is breath and cold water not that great. Some people's Ayurvedic constitutions don't necessarily support cold water. So anyone who's going to practice cold water, like, you'll be fine to do it as long as you've got someone who's a well-versed practitioner that's supporting you through it. But notice how you feel afterwards. If it's affecting you in a way that isn't necessarily beneficial, maybe that's down to it being the first time you've done it. So try it a couple of times because it might be a mental thing. But if you are someone who's practiced it a good few times and it's still not working for you, perhaps you're not the right constitution for it. But I would say the majority of people, it's hugely beneficial for them. You know, I've worked with thousands of people now with the breath and cold water. I started really doing it over lockdown when I realized that I was allowed to do outdoor therapy sessions for up to 15 people. And I wasn't charging any money for it. They were voluntary therapy sessions, but it gave me a purpose over lockdown and really directed me to start taking my journey into breath deeper. But all the blood going into the central line of the body, it nourishes the organs and it builds brown fat around the organs. So you've got these physical benefits. You've then got the mental clarity that comes with it. It really clears out the mind. What I also feel is like it's a purification process as well. I've noticed I could be in the worst mood. I could be having a terrible time, or I say terrible day. I don't really believe in days being good or bad anymore, but I could be moving through something and processing something. And I'll go and do a cold water practice and come away and my whole emotional landscape has changed. Now, these are the physical, mental, emotional benefits that people speak about. For me, there's more going on. I think that the breath and cold water paired together are almost like an alchemic exchange of energy. I believe that when we're doing the holotropic breathing, as we do that, I don't believe we release trauma, okay? I believe that we hold emotions in our body and that fascial release is caused by stretch, pressure, and vibration. When you're breathing dynamically like this, you create fascial release. What that then does is brings up the emotional landscape and you get to breathe into those emotions. It's my firm belief that we don't release trauma. And I think that the spiritual world talks about being on a healing journey and gives us this idea and archetype that we need to fix ourselves. I don't feel that anyone needs to fix themselves. I believe it's our sharp judgments of ourselves, of others, of the stories that we hold within us that are creating the dis-ease and the disillusion. And that when we breathe into them in this way, we come to peace. So just on the cold water side, we can go deeper into that shortly, but just on the cold water side, I am breathing in this way dynamically. Emotions might be rising up, or energetics might be rising up, that I'm then making a conscious decision to create space. So your energetic layer, I've worked with a few different, when I did my sound training, they work with an energy school, and they were talking about when you do these different practices, in your energetic layer, you create pockets of space, and that actually these pockets of space are potentially a little bit vulnerable. So if you have a really deep breath session, say, and then you go out into the world, maybe there's a dissonant energy that's around. I'm not saying it's good or bad, but it's dissonant for your constitution, and you absorb that into that space you've created. Now, what's really beautiful with breath and cold water is that you're creating this space in your energetic layer and creating this presence in your mind. And then you're immediately going into a fresh, neutral body of energy and filling yourself up with that fresh, neutral body of energy. That's my feeling, is that there's an alchemic exchange of energy happening there. You're creating space in your energetic layer through the breath, and then you're immediately going into a fresh, neutral body of water, and that you can set any intention on that water. Like, religions have used water as a purification process for years. So many different religious practices, they purify with water. Other practices, there's a Japanese water practice called Takigayo meditation, which involves sitting under a waterfall and feeling the energy of the waterfall and then dropping into meditation. And I've done this quite a few times, but once I had a real big experience with it. Now, two different schools of thought there. One of them is purification. The other one is that you're receiving this power and energy from the water. And I believe that's what you do when you do breath and cold water. You shed tension in the body, you create space in this energetic layer, and then you immediately go into a fresh body of water and you set an intention. And then afterwards, I often get people in a circle, we do a warm-up, and then I get them to feel that energetic layer that they've created in this circle with us all warming up and moving together and pushing in energy in the middle of this circle. And I get them to consciously plant their intention in it, and we all move the energy up and down and put it off into the ethers.
Wow, it's such a nice way to describe it. A couple of times I've done this, and especially after a tiring day, if you've done this, and then you just feel like you're completely recharged. And again, if you're then out with people, and you can just feel that the magic is there. Somehow, I mean, now that you're putting in these words, it's kind of making sense.
Yeah, because it's not even a conscious thing. Like, I feel like everyone's, there's amazing facilitators all around the world doing these things, and Wim Hof's incredible. All of his facilitators are incredible. I taught at a festival, and because of the logistics and complications, I ended up doing 19 sessions over 2 days. So I did 19 hours worth of breath and cold water sessions, and it was a lot. It was intense and I was very tired for about a week afterwards. But it allowed me, repeating those sessions over and over again, to really start thinking about it from this different layer and level and going, what's going on here energetically, and adding in these different parts. And I really love to facilitate it that way now. Obviously, depending on the environment, though, I communicate it differently. If I'm in a corporate environment, I did a session for ASICs, and all of the corporate part of ASICs, they're into sports, but they're not necessarily into spirituality. All of their athletes are runners. So then I use mindfulness in terms of my words rather than spirituality. I use mindfulness because spirituality and mindfulness for me are often...
they're the same thing. They are really the same thing.
They're the same thing. It's just different words. But for me, I'm always like, know your audience. And it's not me not telling the truth. Everything I'll speak is something I believe in. But it's like, if I'm suddenly stood in front of a group of French people who their primary language is French, why am I going to speak English when I can speak fluent French? So then I'm in these environments with people who aren't necessarily into spirituality. If I bombard them with spirituality, they'll tune out. They'll go either, I'm not spiritual enough for this.
Or is this some hocus pocus?
Or is this hocus pocus? And it's beautiful with those people, because then what you do is you just give them a little bit of science. You go, this is the reason why we're doing this. Scientifically, this is happening. They're switched in. Then I'll use different words rather than spirituality. I'll use mindfulness. But I'm saying the same thing. Yeah. And suddenly...
If you look at it, all these three words now, the three words, but the ones that we are just talking about, mindfulness and spirituality, as we discuss, are quite similar.
Yeah.
And the topic that we've been discussing about, breath. I think breath is the first thing that makes you mindful.
Yes.
Just connecting to the breath, and that probably summarizes, I think, this first half of the discussion on the breath. And we take a 2 minutes break and then restart this discussion. And
have some chai.
So welcome back, Leo.
Thank you.
There's something I wanted to discuss to you with my observations, and wanted to have your thoughts on it.
Yes, please.
It's when I came to Rishikesh 3 years ago, life seemed simpler. There used to be Hatha yoga classes. There used to be some animal flow classes, some dance classes, some sound healing sessions here and there.
Yeah.
Then there used to be Reiki practitioners, and there used to be massage therapists. And just in these 3 years, maybe now that I'm seeing more people or knowing more people, or is it the trend that's happening, but sound healing is mixing up with Reiki, and it's mixing up with breathwork, and yoga classes are moving on with movement classes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And people are even adding visual aids and different things. And some people are talking about how Tai Chi kind of movements are being blended into yoga. So there's so many people doing very, very different things.
Yes.
And it's fascinating to watch. And I noticed that session which you all did that day. It was a mix of sound healing and breathwork, and followed with dance. And where is this? I mean, is this that, are we trying to cater to a market for everyone, or is it like scientific? And these experiences are beautiful, but...
Yeah, but what about the pure practices themselves?
Yes, what about the pure practices themselves?
I believe in both.
Okay.
I believe in both. I believe that a 2.5 hour breath practice solely as breath is so powerful. I believe a hour and a half hatha class as it is beautifully powerful. However, I also believe that these different modalities massively complement each other if they are done in a mindful way. If it is considered what practice you are doing and when, how that is affecting the energetics, and then how you move from there. I did a men's retreat last year in Tuscany, and I worked with a guy who is he's an internal family systems therapist and constellations therapist. This guy's got deep years of practice. Now, I was working with him, and what I asked him before we went into the retreat, we spoke, me, him, and the organizer, who's also a beautiful man. We spoke a few weeks beforehand, said, right, how are we going to curate the schedule? What we're going to do? And my response to him was, what is the journey that you want these men to go through? And he told me, and I said, right, I am here to support the energetics of that journey. If you want these men ready to go, stimulated, empowered, I can do that with the breath. If you want these men to be calm, reflective, introspective, we can do that with the breath or the yoga practice. If you want these men to be held and to be soft, we can use sound for that. So really, I see sometimes these kind of things where there's a lot of different modalities mixed together, where it's just done for the sake of it, where it's like, okay, well, we'll put cacao in here and then we'll throw this here and here. And, people are automatically attracted to anything that has cacao with it. But if you're not really considering the energetics of the flow of that practice, then it can often actually not be beneficial, and you would be better off with just a cacao ceremony, with just a breathwork session, with just a dance session. As an example, with the session that me and Ian did at your space the other day, we had a cacao ceremony. Now, cacao is a beautiful heart-opening medicine. When it is practiced mindfully, when you are in stillness, when you really feel the medicine in your body, as well as it doing all the things on a chemical level that it does, with the riboflavin, with the energetic properties, like, it's my firm belief that it opens up the heart center and allows you to be more receptive. So you have this cacao ceremony that's doing this. The breath that we then did beforehand was about 40 minutes. It wasn't a really, really long session. So people aren't going deeply, deeply, deeply into their emotional landscape. They'll be dropping in a little bit, but it's not the same as if I was doing a 2-hour workshop with them. However, this heart-opening medicine has put them here. Okay, they're then breathing into this part of the body, the diaphragm and the psoas. They're then working into their heart chakra, if you wanted to go into a chakra, if you wanted to start speaking about chakras, and the lungs are directly connected with the heart chakra. So that the cacao has opened up the heart. The breath works then open this even further. And then any emotional process that they're moving through, or anything that they're moving through,
that gets done with the dance.
Yeah, they then get to articulate and move through that somatically with the dance. And then afterwards, we calm and we ground. So really, my feeling is that it's a beautiful thing that all of these practices are unfolding. And these practices are unfolding now, I feel, because the wellness world is starting to look at things in a more somatic level. I see the practices that are somatic based. Now, what I mean by somatic is, as an example, in our Western culture, in the Western culture, the West are becoming very prevalent and very good at talking therapy. And talking therapy is a powerful tool. It's a beautiful thing to understand what's happened in your past, to theorize why these things have happened, to unpack them with a therapist. When a therapist is a mirror for you, when someone's having a conversation with you and they're not imposing their ideas, they're just asking questions and allowing you to come up with the ideas from within. This is beautiful, but this is only half of the therapeutic journey. Okay.
It's actually just scratching the surface. There's a lot that needs to be done after that too.
Yeah, or even alongside it. So this yes. Exactly what you're saying. For me, I see it as half of your journey. And I'm not even going to say half of the healing journey, because as I said earlier, I don't believe that anyone needs healing. Like, if you are listening to this podcast now, I do not believe that you require healing or fixing. I believe that you are holding stories in yourself, and you are holding memories from your past that have a story around them, that are creating dis-ease because you are in judgment of yourself or others. And when you start to unpack these judgments, you can come into a place of peace. But for me, the intellectual practice, this is great. It's useful, okay? Without the somatics, you're still holding those emotions in your muscle fascia. So the Eastern medicine believes we have meridian lines in the body. It believes that we hold our different emotions in different meridian lines in the body. As an example, for different places where we would hold emotions, there's the belief system that on the right shoulder we hold our financial responsibilities, but also the financial responsibilities we're holding onto of others. So this can be our parents, our spouse, our partners. On our left shoulders, it's believed that we're holding on to our emotional responsibilities, our own emotional landscape, and other people's. Now, this is the meridian line theory that's been around for eons, okay? What's really interesting is about 15, 16 years ago now, a guy dissected the muscle fascia intricately and managed to get it out of the whole body. He managed to extract the muscle fascia.
Okay.
Now, when I talk about muscle fascia, I'm talking about there is a layer beneath the skin and above the muscles. And you want to think of it almost like, you know, the netting on a punnet of oranges. Imagine there's this netting that encases the whole of the body. Now, Western medicine,
Spider-Man.
Yeah, like Spider-Man, exactly. Yes, just like that. Now, Western medicine thought that this was just quite simply a layer that was a sheath to hold in the organs of the body and to protect the organs. A guy was dissecting, operating on someone's wrist, and he was under full anaesthetism. I can't remember what his name was, but he'd anaesthetized his patient, and he had a microscope there. Now, this patient was under full anesthetic, and yet his muscle fascia was moving. It was moving almost like a web. And so this was the first indication, okay, there's something more going on here. This part of the body that should be asleep right now is moving on its own. Now, the muscle fascia was just believed to be this almost dead sheath, dead layer. When this other scientist dissected the muscle fascia, it became apparent when it was laid over the meridian line theory that there is a 95% correlation with the meridian lines and the muscle fascia of the body, which from me supports the idea that the muscle fascia is the meridian line structure of the body. And it is my firm belief that within our muscle fascia, if we're talking about it from a Western medicine sense, we hold our emotions. So I believe if I have an emotional issue, or I say issue, if I have an emotion come in, I see our emotions like water. If I have an emotion come in, and then I create a story around that emotion that is someone or something treating me unfairly, I believe that I then store that in some part of my body. Within the story that I've encapsulated that emotion in, I put it in my body, okay? And then when we're doing these different somatic practices, I can unpack that intellectually all I want and start to work into it on an intellectual level. But until I allow that emotion to rise and I either breathe into it, I move through it, or I articulate it, I give that emotion space to be seen and heard, it stays stuck. Now, if you're thinking about water, you look at the Ganga, right? It flows so beautifully, so freely, right? So healing and nourishing because it flows. If there was a stagnant pool of water just outside that wasn't moving, what happens when it's left for days and days? It becomes toxic. It becomes stagnant. The chemistry of it starts to change. This is what I believe happens within our bodies. And this is what I believe a lot of major illnesses come from. I believe a lot of cancer is caused by stuck emotions. And it's really interesting that often when people have different forms of cancer, if you were to speak to them about their emotional landscape, it would match the chakra theories. So, for example, I know somebody and they had prostate cancer, and they had real anger about their past, and they felt like their survival had been threatened from their past, and they held on to a story for about 30 years. And then they had prostate cancer, and I believe that story that they had then manifested itself as a result of that pool of energy becoming toxic. But again, everything I'm speaking about now is only my feeling. I'm not saying I'm right. I'm not saying everyone else is wrong. I always hear things, see things, practice things myself. And if it feels like a truth from my own experiential knowledge, I will articulate it. But it is never to say that other opinions, belief systems are wrong. I just like to express what my beliefs are, always from a place of non-judgment.
Lovely. And it's actually quite elementary if one thinks about it, just the breath, we were taught as kids that, something happened, just take 2 or 3 deep breaths, calm down, It's been given that calm down if someone said something wrong to you, just calm down, take a few deep breaths, because nose calms you down. But it seems evident that doing breath work, doing pranayam to connect to yourself, at some bit, at just a very, very top level helps you calm down. And then whatever it's doing to your systems underneath it, it's releasing emotional blockages. It's just doing so many things to you. I think it's really worth exploring.
Yes, for sure. And also what's really interesting there is you're kind of touching on vagal toning too. When we're dynamically breathing like this, we're putting the body under a gentle stressor. When you're in yoga and you're in a posture and you're holding a difficult posture, and then you're being taught to breathe calmly, you're putting the body under a gentle stressor. When you're going into cold water and you're going into an environment that the body is not used to, you're putting the body under a gentle stressor. Now, what you're doing is something called vagal toning there. And what happens with vagal toning is you're creating a stressor in the body, and then you're learning to be calm while you are moving through that stress. What that then does is it tones this vagus nerve, and the origin of the vagus nerve is at the back of your neck, which is why when I'm doing cold water with everyone, I always try and get them to get into the back of their neck, because I want them to really get to the origin of that vagus nerve. What that then does is it changes your response to stress. Yes. So then, you'll know from yoga, right? You've done a yoga class and you come outside and say you're walking up the street in Tapavan. Have I pronounced that right?
Yes.
Yeah, you're walking up the street in Tapavan and, a bike will nearly run you over. And the day before you might have gone, what are you doing? You're crazy. But instead you go, and it creates this space. I believe all of these different practices and this vagal toning and the mindfulness, they create a space between something happening and your reaction. And you have a choice then. You are not being driven by your emotional landscape. You have a choice over how you react.
And what it's actually doing is it's actually teaching you a technique, right? So when you're doing an uncomfortable pose, and you're trying to keep a smile through it and calm breath. So now you've learned how to calm your breath.
Yes.
Right? And that same thing as you do it in life situations, which aren't very pleasant.
Yes.
And which is causing you discomfort, and you calm your breath.
Yes.
It's you've learned it when you've done your practices.
And you're not even conscious that you're then taking that off the mat. And, you know, it's so interesting, right? The often Western depicted practices of yoga, it's all about that practice that's on the mat, which is only 1 or 2/8 of the practice of yoga, and all of the other practices like the yoga philosophy get left out. I try and layer in the yoga philosophy within all of the practices that I facilitate, even breath work that is not a traditional yogic practice. I will put the yamas and niyamas within there.
So you're talking about taping your mouth with it.
Yes. Yeah.
And I've heard the benefits of it a couple of times, and I would love you to talk about it more. But I just find that resistance, or maybe somewhere even deep down I'm scared, so I've not yet done it.
So normal. So normal. That was what the two reactions I have is when I talk about mouth taping, people will either be like, their kink mind will come in and they'll be like, oh, 50 Shades of Grey, or they'll go, oh, it's scary, the idea of taping my mouth. Now, if you tape your mouth and your body is, unless you have some like deep irregularities or issues, again, like with heart or with sleep apnea, you know, if you have sleep apnea and stuff, I would go to a doctor and ask for their advice on this. Unless you have those serious conditions, okay? If you're mouth taping and you're breathing through your nose and then somehow your nose becomes blocked, which is highly unlikely for that to happen, by the way, you'll just wake up. And often what happens when people mouth tape, they'll do it and then they'll wake up in the middle of the night and they've maybe had 4 hours of mouth taping and the rest of the time they're not mouth taping. And they go, oh, you know, I woke up in the middle of the night and the mouth tape has come off, so I failed to do it. That's still 4 hours where you know you have been breathing through your nose 100%. Now, I know so many people that say to me, I'm definitely a nose breather. I 100% breathe through my nose at night. And, you know, maybe I'm at a stage now where I am breathing through my nose at 100% at night, but I don't know that. I'm asleep. Now, you go, why would you want to breathe through your nose? Okay, so your mouth is not really meant for breathing. Okay, your mouth is meant for eating. When we breathe through our mouth, what we're doing is we're changing the oxygen and carbon dioxide balance. And we're actually putting in more oxygen than carbon dioxide. Now, people might be like, oh, we're putting more oxygen in the body. But what you're doing then is you're unbalancing the oxygen and carbon dioxide exchange.
People automatically believe that if it's oxygen, it's good, and if it's not oxygen, it's not good.
Yeah, which isn't true. You want balanced oxygen and carbon dioxide. We are in a constant cyclical dance with nature. We are, every time we exhale, feeding the trees carbon dioxide. Every time we inhale, we're receiving oxygen from trees. But this exchange that happens in the body, you want it to be as efficient as possible. When it's efficient, you are using less energy, right? When you're breathing through your mouth, you're making an inefficient exchange happen. Not only that, you're not filtering the air, you're also not cooling down the air. So the body, it requires a lot more energy to process the energy that's coming in through the breath. When you're breathing through your nose is actually a huge cavity that comes all the way back in the skull. If you look into it, look at Google and look at how wide and how much capacity you have. Your nose isn't just here, it breathes all the way back, okay? And it goes through a number of, like, a length of the canal. Now, when you're breathing through your nose, what you're also doing is you're actually creating nitric oxide in the body. Nitric oxide is one of the most, or releasing nitric oxide in the body, should I say. Nitric oxide is one of the most powerful healing chemicals of the body. It's also a vasodilator, so it widens the capillaries in the blood vessels in the body and the brain. And it's helping you heal when you sleep overnight. It's helping all of the processes move. Okay. When you're breathing through the nose, you're also regulating the temperature of the breath, so it is done more efficiently, and you're also perfectly balancing out the oxygen and carbon dioxide. So breathing like this, when you do that in your sleep, it will transition into the rest of your life. If you start breathing through your nose when you sleep, on an unconscious level in the rest of your life, you're more likely to breathe through your nose. As well, because you're not taking these big gasps of air, it's more likely that you're going to be breathing down into your belly, and you're going to be taking slower and calmer breaths. Now, holotropic breathing, you're doing these big breaths and you're taking a lot of breath capacity and you're breathing a lot of times in the practice. There's a lot of yogis that see this as the anti-yoga. Okay, they would go, no, this is the anti-yoga. The purpose of the yogic breath is to create slower, longer breaths in your life. From my perspective, holotropic breathing, what I'm doing, I'm working into the emotional landscape. As a result of working into the emotional landscape, I'm alleviating the stress of the rest of my life. I'm not carrying those stresses.
It probably would result with longer and more deep breaths.
Exactly.
For the rest of the day.
Exactly.
So for a little bit of time, it's faster breath.
Yeah, if I'm cleaning the lens in which I see the world, I am more likely to be breathing in a longer and slower way. In turn, if I'm opening the fascia out around my lungs, up here in my chest, around my belly, also, you're not just breathing into the front line of the body, you're breathing into the whole back line of the body as well. When you think about breath, you want to see the body as this whole three-dimensional vessel. You're breathing all into these different areas. So I am actually creating more diaphragmatic capacity. As a result of that, I have the potential to take longer and fuller breaths. So it's my firm belief that none of these breaths are right or wrong. Oxygen advantage, yogic pranayama, holotropic breathing, they can be beautifully intrinsically linked and they can complement each other. Yes, 100%. Tape on your mouth. Honestly, a couple of things, like before we round off this podcast, if you are still listening to this podcast, a few things I would love you to try. Okay, if you don't have a big hoofing beard like me, okay, go in your first aid kit, find the little white fluffy tape that's in the first aid kit, and try putting that tape on your mouth when you go to sleep. If that doesn't work, you can get specific mouth tape, or you can do what I do, which is use physio tape. I buy this physio tape that's really cheap on Amazon. I do use Amazon sometimes, unfortunately, bad yogi. And I cut it into strips and I make about 400 strips from a single roll. And I just put that over my mouth when I sleep. Try mouth taping. Okay. That's one of the things I want you to try. Another thing I want you to try, if you can, is before you do an intense yoga practice or an intense bit of gym exercise, about an hour and a half beforehand, drink a glass of beetroot juice. It is high in nitric oxide. It is a vasodilator. It will superpower your practice. And the last thing I would love you to try, okay, when you wake up in the morning, before you go to sleep, or if you've had a high amount of stress and you've been staring at a computer screen or on your mobile phone for a long period of time, stand barefoot on the earth for 30 seconds. Just 30 seconds. That is all it takes. 30 seconds is all it takes for you to release the positive ions that are in your body. Most people are wearing shoes all the time, never standing on nature. We are surrounded by technology that can, incidentally, you can hold up to 20 volts of electricity in your body from all of this technology you're using all the time. If you stand barefoot on the earth for 30 seconds, I guarantee you it will downregulate your nervous system. It will change your response to the world around you from that 30 seconds. And if you are going to sleep, you will sleep deeper and in a much more nourishing way. I feel that in the wellness and spiritual communities, people's general constitution more suits the smoking. If you're talking about like smoking cannabis, it would more suit that lifestyle now. I actually smoked cannabis from the age of 13 to 23 for 10 years, a lot, and took lots of drugs between the age of 18 and about 21. And I'm 40 now, so I feel like I kind of got it out of my system. But I feel that many people are still in that where they want to drop into it. Now, again, for me, my general path, there's two things I'm working into. I'm working into coming from a place of non-judgment as much as possible. So not judging people as better or worse, good, bad, right or wrong, above or below. I have my feelings, I have my beliefs, but I don't impose them onto other people. And so if someone is doing something that is not in alignment with what I would do, it doesn't necessarily mean they're wrong. They have different conditions, they have a different perspective. So that's the one thing, the practice of non-judgment. Then the other thing is a practice of becoming nothing or no one. So I am working towards, as much as I can, detaching myself from the ideas of my name, my age, my job, who I am, what I do. All of these are just ideas and concepts. When we have a deeper conversation that extends outside of those, we are communicating on a soul level. It isn't about that. Now, I know people that are very, very mindful with their practices of smoking. You know, they'll turn it into a ceremony. For me, I don't believe in right or wrong, but I would always question within myself if I'm doing something habitually. I'm just doing it for the sake of it. It has become a habit. It has become a crutch that I am using to sustain or to live my life. Anything. I remember I did yoga for a year every day for 2 hours a day. And then on the next year, I continued to do it. I set a goal for myself. I'm going to do yoga every day. Okay, second year, right, I'm going to carry on this because I really enjoyed it. On about day 450, I asked myself the question, who am I if I don't practice yoga today? And the answer was, you're not enough if you don't do yoga today. So yoga had become my habitual addiction. Now I practice yoga every day, but I practice it in different ways and thought forms. And I practice it not because I need to validate myself or to let everyone else know. I do it because it is part of my lifestyle and I love it and enjoy it. If I have a day, like for instance, I haven't done any yoga today. That's perfect. That's fine. That's perfect. When we become super, super rigid. So this, what I mean by this is, you know, people that are smoking, how are they doing that? If they're doing that in a non-mindful way, okay, well, we're human beings, there's balance. But at the same time, if it's actually disrupting their practice and disrupting their perspective on the rest of their lives, I wouldn't say it's wrong, but I would be like, okay, like question that, sit with that. Is it actually in alignment with you? In turn, there's people that are doing it very, very medicinally, almost from a shamanic practice. You know, the shamans use cannabis as a medicine, just like cacao. Yeah, and tobacco. Yeah, rapé, like rapé or hape or rapé. You know, I actually work a little bit with rapé, and I found it to be a very, very powerful medicine that when used in a really mindful way, when set up with good meditation and beautiful intention, can really, really support clearing the energetic channels and like clearing and shifting any perspectives we might have. So it is prevalent in the spiritual community, though. I have seen that and observed it, and I've noticed it here actually, especially. And I just see it for what it is. I go, this is part of the human culture. I myself noticed that if I do anything like that, or even when I first started utilizing rapé, I was doing, whenever I would do a ceremony with people, I would also, after the ceremony, utilize it myself when I first started using it. And then I realized it had become habitual. And actually, energetically, it was disrupting me. If you observe, by being habitual with anything, it is energetically disrupting you, or it has become a necessity for you to be present or to have energy, I would question it.
Lovely. Actually, this conversation about observing your energy field.
Yes.
I think a part of mindfulness, as at some point one is able to kind of understand their own energy fields.
Mm-hmm.
I think that probably happens a little distance into yoga, but I think that if one can get into, I mean,
Yes.
then it's really virtually automatic being mindful.
Yeah.
And one realizes where one is agitated or tired or sometimes fearful, whatever one can feel it in their own energy field. A thing which I've seen with so many yogis and some spiritual people, they also get very egoistic, and their particular way of practice is a very superior way, and others who aren't following their practice, they have this kind of an ego or judgmental way that they look at other people, and it's sometimes that's quite off-putting, I mean, it's
There's a term for it, actually. It's called the cosmic joke. So, for instance, someone will...
Cosmic joke.
The cosmic joke. So someone will, for instance, I'll give an example, get into yoga, become very, very passionate about yoga, start going to yoga classes regularly, start practicing themselves, decide they want to become a yoga teacher, love yoga with all their heart and become a yoga teacher, be really passionate about it, and then start to read a bit more. And then at some point in this equation around here, the ego hijacks the yogic journey, and then it's like, oh, well, I'm very knowledgeable and let me tell you about this, and no, that's wrong, and you're doing that the wrong way and this is the right way. And then suddenly you're back at the start again. And actually every single one of us in our lives does this all the time. This, again, like if I see and witness that, I don't necessarily think that person's good, bad, right, wrong, better or worse. I just see that they're at that point in their journey, and hopefully at some point they'll have an epiphany where they go, okay, my ego's got involved again. And your ego is a beautiful thing. Like, it will constantly come into everything you do, and you're constantly, like, for me, that ego coming in is perfect, because what then happens is you eventually have an ego death, and that ego death gives you the opportunity to shed those previous identities of who you are and start again. Like, I feel like in my life I've been through about 6 or 7 of these ego deaths where I've gone, I am definitely a professional rollerblader and I have a roller disco company and this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And then as soon as I've solidified that idea of this is who I am and this is what I'm going to do, the universe goes, nah, you're not that. I've not seen a more aesthetically beautiful studio in Rishikesh so far. And I haven't met studio owners or people working in a studio that are as affable, as friendly, as open and supportive as all of you. So yeah, that's my thoughts so far. All amazing so far.
I would want to do definitely a couple of training sessions with you before you do.
Let's do it.
Maybe just for the benefit of everyone who's listening, could we go through a minute or two of breath or meditation, anything that we do?
100%. So I've actually bought in some little instruments and I've got them around me, and we can do a very brief meditation. So I'll drop everyone into a brief meditation shortly. I'll use some little sound instruments to help relax you and drop you into present moment awareness. Normally when I facilitate, I'd have music on in the background, but it's not required here. What we'll then do is we'll go into 2 minutes of holotropic breathing. Now, if the body allows, the thing you want to do here is take a inhalation as though you're pulling through a straw, and an open-mouthed exhale. Yeah, no pause. Exactly. No pause at the top or the bottom of the breath, and breathing into your belly. You can even place your hands on your belly when you breathe if it feels like that's going to help you propriocept into your belly. If that's a little bit too much and the pace that I'm giving is a little bit too fast, try breathing in and out through the nose a little bit slower, or taking an open-mouthed inhale and exhale. So I'll guide you through a little bit of relaxation for about a minute. Then we'll take a 2-minute round of breath. I'll then cue an inhale and get you to hold at the top of the breath, and we'll just do about a 30-second breath retention, and I'll explain what to do when we get there. Sound good? Okay, amazing. Let's drop into it. So just start to allow the body to soften and relax. You can be in a seated position on a chair, or you can be on the floor, you can be kneeling or with legs crossed. Allow the spine to lengthen up, the crown of the head reaching towards the ceiling or the sky if you're outside, and feel the contact points on the earth beneath you. You can place your hands on your belly here and just take a soft inhale through the nose and a clearing open-mouthed exhale. One more of these, breathing in, letting go of the breath. Fully and completely breathe out and hold here for 5 seconds. Take a soft and full breath in. Release and let go. And you can just ask yourself in this moment, what would I like to absorb and receive from this practice with every single inhale And what am I shedding and releasing with every single exhale? Let's begin our breath. So take a soft and full breath in. Clearing open-mouthed exhale. 3, 2, 1, begin. Inhale. Exhale. Follow my breath. Inhale. Exhale. Good. Keep going. Inhale. Exhale. Follow my cues. So, inhale. Good. Exhale. Let's start again. Let's start again and follow the cues with the inhale and with the exhales. We can cut, right? We can crop it. Okay, beautiful. So, okay, let go of the breath. Okay, so let's take a deep and full breath in to begin. And a clearing open-mouthed exhale. 3, 2, 1, begin. Inhale. Exhale. Good. Let's start again. Exhale. 3, 2, 1, begin. Inhale. Exhale. Good. Inhale. Exhale. Stay with that breath. Every single inhale creates space. Every single exhale, release. Inhale, exhale, rising, falling. Inhale, exhale, rising, falling. Yo, yeah, yeah, yo. Yeah, yeah, yo. You are, yeah, yeah. You are, yo. You are, yeah, yeah. You are. Last 3. Inhale and out. Last 2. Inhale. Let it go. Last 1. Breathe in. Full exhalation. Exhale every bit of the breath out. Good. Now take a deep and full breath in. Hold at the top of the breath here. Relax the face. Release the jaw. Soften the tongue from the roof of the mouth. If you feel the desire to breathe, gently swallow or sip in a little bit of air. We're just going to stay here for 20 seconds. Feel the sensations of energy in the body. Witness it all for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Soft exhalation. Beautiful. Take a soft and full breath in. And a clearing exhale to let go. Now just sit with the breath. Let it become passive. Let go of control. Notice how you feel. Has there been any changes in the physical body? The energetic layer? The intellectual or the emotional? No overthinking, just watching. If you have anything that you'd like to release at the end of this practice, we will take a collective breath in a moment. And if you have an intention to absorb and receive, you can take it with an inhale and perhaps join me with a soft Om chant. So if it's appropriate for you, if not, don't do it. Bring the hands to the center of the chest, push the thumbs to the sternum, take a soft and full breath in. Shed what is not required with an exhale. Set an intention and perhaps breathe it in for a soft Om chant. Inhale. Beautiful. Breathe in the vibrations of this collective and bow your head to your hands in honor of yourself, in honor of this collective energy we've cultivated together, and in honor of the practices that allow us to drop deeper. Jai, everyone. Victory to you and your beautiful practices. And thank you so much for joining us on this podcast.
Thank you. If you would like to know more about Leo, please click on the link below. And if you'd like to know a little bit more about our work, please click on the link below.
And if you are going to be in Rishikesh, you must come to this place. It is stunning. It is beautiful. I'm definitely going to be spending some more time here. While I'm here, I'm going to come to some workshops. I'm definitely going to come and get a treatment too. And thank you so much for inviting me into your space.
Thank you so much.
Bless you. And yeah, if any of you would like some more information, if perhaps you'd like some different breath and meditation recordings, you can find me on Instagram. It's just my name as it is in the description. It's just Leo_Oppenheim. Please drop me a message. If you listen to this podcast, I'd love to know your thoughts. If you listen to this podcast and you were like, I don't agree with that, I'd love to have a conversation with you. I am always here to learn. I am always receptive. I am always happy to be wrong about things and to see different perspectives and ideas.
From my perspective, one of the reasons we started this space is that we have amazing people like Leo coming here and telling us about their arts, their science, and their magic, and that we can share it with the world. So, thank you for watching this. Thank you.